How a Romance Novel Saved the Galaxy by Ariana Daralte. Chapter 19, Jaster 3, Galadran 3. Jaster's biggest worry about the final Galadran once the Jedi arrived was keeping his birthday focused, especially the younger ones. He had sent a sharp reminder across the comms just before they arrived that all their bouchers were recording so they would not only have evidence of Death Watch's atrocities, but also would have records of the Jedi that the Verde could watch at their leisure. That settled most of them, thankfully. But Jaster had to admit fighting with the Jedi was distracting. Their leader, Dooku, was a tall, dignified man who fought with the economy of movement only found in experienced warriors. He directed the other Jedi into astonishing feats, the Jedi spending almost as much time in the air as those with jetpacks. When one of Death Watch broke through their lines from the air and launched straight at where Jaster and Dooku were standing, Dooku held out one hand and twisted. The attacker's Durasteel boucher crumpled. They dropped dead to the ground. Jaster swallowed. God, the book had been right. That was both terrifying and, indeed, slightly arousing. "Hello," came Django's voice over the comms. "Vizslas fled." Jaster cursed mentally. For a group that proposed of returning to the conquering traditions of the Mandalorian past, Death Watch sure fled from battle a lot. Vizsla in particular was very good at covering his flank while he retreated. Jaster ordered Django to secure anything left behind and withdraw. "Dooku!" Jaster called. The Jedi had drifted to the left to protect their medics. Dooku called another Jedi over and headed back. "Mandalore?" "Vizslas run. We're just mopping up their rear guard at this point." There were around a dozen Death Watch still sniping at them. The ones with slug throwers aiming for Jedi, while the ones with blaster rifles went for Mandalorians. The shots were growing more drawn out every minute as either the Jedi or the true Mandalorians narrowed in on the remaining Death Watch. "I don't suppose any of them will surrender." Dooku's tone was a little wistful, like that of a man who had seen enough war. Jaster sometimes felt the same way. "You can offer, but Death Watch likes to sabotage anything they leave behind. Both equipment and people. They're just as likely to blow themselves up when you get close so they could take you out." They had lost some good Verde to such traps in the early days of the Civil War. "Fanatics," said Dooku, voice dripping with disdain. "Death Watch conditions all its recruits into their mindset with beatings and propaganda. They take them young as Ade. Part of the Civil War was fought over them stealing Ade from our people. They had never found the body of Django's Orevord Arla on Concord Dawn. Jaster suspected she'd been taken by Death Watch and found himself vacillating between hoping she'd survived their training or hoping she'd found an escape through death. He knew Django often felt the same. "And yet they've stopped due to this book." Jaster watched as the last few of Death Watch's weapons fell silent. He was unsurprised the book was becoming known to the Jedi. "We thought they had. I haven't received any reports of missing Ade in months. But seeing how many we just fought against, I don't know where they're getting their recruits, especially since they're losing people due to the book. And due to their failed ambush on Corda 6 a few months ago." Jaster reflexively ducked when one of the buildings holding the last of Death Watch exploded. He hoped none of his Verde were in there. Both he and Dooku moved to organize their people. Jaster set Miles to putting together their casualty list, ignoring the puppy eyes the man was throwing at Dooku's ad Kavami. The dust and smoke from the explosion were dying down when one section of the rubble began to shift. It floated upwards, supported from below by a metal table. Two of Jaster's Verde scrambled free of the resulting hole before turning as one to haul one of the Jedi out after them, seconds before the table and rubble crashed to the ground. From the lingering touches and hugs between all involved, including the rather dazed Jedi, Jaster suspected there would be a lot of gratefulness that evening if his Verde had any say in the matter. Dooku came over, watching the scene with an unreadable expression. "I just received a report from the nights I left at the governor's mansion. He has been arrested for conspiracy to defraud the Republic. The landing pad cameras show he met with Death Watch in his home. This truly was a trap for the true Mandalorians." "And the Jedi if you were supposed to destroy us," pointed out Jaster. "Won't he be tried here on Galadran?" "He shouldn't be if the charge is against the Republic stick. Fortunately, Knight Marcus also discovered his collection of rare masks from across the galaxy, including a Landaran face mask. Jaster grinned. The Landaran were a private people who lived on a pastoral world in the Mid-Rim. They believed that the masks they wore their entire lives contained part of their souls. As an early member of the Republic, they had gotten it enshrined into law that anyone other than a Landaran having a Landaran face mask in their possession would pay a fine of 1,000,000 credits or submit themselves to the Landaran to work off their debt. That didn't wholly stop people from trading them, but it did make anyone who didn't have 1,000,000 credits to spare steer very clear of them. The governor of Galedran wasn't nearly that rich. So at least we'll ruin him financially, Jaster said. He'd have to double-check they'd been paid in full, but that was at least some form of revenge if he weaseled out of the other charges. And that was if some Mandalorian didn't kill him once there were no Jedi involved. Django marched up, trailed by a mixed group of Verde and Jedi. Permission to pursue Vizsla alone. You didn't have to be a Jedi to see that Django was enraged at Vizsla escaping from them. Hardly a surprise, considering the Shabur had killed both his boar in front of him. Have one ship try to follow them and report back. They are not to engage, Jaster ordered. Django was visibly forcing himself not to disagree. Jaster stepped closer, initiating a closed comm with his ad. We will go after him, Jenica. It's clear that every time we let up on Death Watch, they use that time to grow stronger. Concord Dawn, Cordyceps, and now Galadron. No more. But we sent most of our Verde away before the Jedi arrived, and we learned about Death Watch. We aren't at our full strength, so we'll all rendezvous in the Mandalore sector and then approach Death Watch in force. I like both, said Django, punctuating it with a nod of his head. Jaster could tell Django still wasn't happy, but at least he wouldn't go herring off on his own. Dooku had ordered the Jeti with Django off to help with the civilians, while Jaster and Django were talking. With Django off to send a ship in pursuit, Jaster finally had a moment to discuss what he wanted with Dooku. He led the Jeti away from the collapsed building to an area which was not so busy. Jaster pulled off his bougie. He liked how the cold air felt on his face. Now, Bandamir. If this is about the complaint by Holden Law, the Jedi Council is addressing it, said Dooku primly. They had better do it soon because that Shabur Jen has lost Kenobi. What? For a single moment, the Jedi calm had been shot right off Dooku's face. Holden Law is one of my Verde. He contacted me today to tell me that Obi-Wan Kenobi is missing, and Jin is doing nothing about it. And that's on top of all the Osig this Jin already pulled. Qui-Gon wouldn't... Dooku trailed off, clearly realizing that Jen really would. There was a flash of anger on the man's face before it was wiped away. He should have reported it to the council. Someone would have told me if his mission went even further wrong. There was something off about the Jedi's expression. Why would they tell you? Jaster asked. The Jedi was stiff as a board. Qui-Gon was my Padawan long ago, he admitted. Jaster couldn't help his immediate distaste. Granted, Jim was an adult, and Dooku was hardly responsible for what he did decades later, but it was still a mark against the Jedi. On the other hand, Jaster could now ask a very frank question. What the conk is wrong with him? Demanded Jaster. He watched Dooku consider out of his thought. It has been over a decade since I have seen him in person, Dooku said. He was always stubborn, arrogant, and unaccepting of criticism. He was also amazing with the living force, excellent at solving crises, if in somewhat unorthodox ways, and a brilliant fighter. By all accounts, his last Padawan was very like him. When that same Padawan fell to the dark side, Qui-Gon rejected his first Padawan and rejected the idea of having another. That is the only explanation I have for his poor treatment of Initiate Kenobi. Wait. The Shabur have rejected his first ad as well? Karkin, how? Do you Jedi not have therapy? He asked. Dooku looked amused for a second. We are mind healers. The trouble is that getting a stubborn Jedi Master to attend and benefit from them is somewhat impossible. Nor does the Council make it their priority. Jaster was unimpressed. Remind me to explain to you our system for grounding Verde who are unstable. Now, do you want to explain to me why Kenobi was sent off to an assignment he's not suited to and before he aged out? Because you can't blame that on Jen. Dooku sniffed again before staring in Jaster's eyes for a long moment. The Jedi sighed. I'm going to be frank with you, Mandalore, because I know yours are a very frank people. I would ask you not to act on my speculations until I have them confirmed. In return, I will explain the workings of the Jedi Council to you, so you may contact them with your issues. I am aware there is a great change going on in Mandalorian society due to the Mandalorians' dilemma that has caused the Mandalorians to take more of a positive interest in Jedi than has ever happened before. I am also aware that Initiate Kenobi is likely to have already been adopted by Holdan Lao. It has been 1,000 years since there was a Mandalorian Jedi, so his way will be a hard one but not unprecedented. Tade Vizsla, said Jaster. I've been wanting to compare our sources on him with the Jedis. I happen to be friends with the head archivist of the temple. I could put you in touch. Now that was a tempting offer. Very well. I won't act on your speculations. I have no true answers for you, but I suspect it was my former master Yoda, the Grand Master of the temple. He's over 900 years old and prone to meddling in his lineage's affairs. I refused to take on another Padawan several times before he shoved Kamari in my path. He is very fond of Qui-Gon, despite or possibly because of his maverick ways. It wouldn't surprise me at all to find out he orchestrated the whole thing to help Qui-Gon. That's an awful reason to put an ad in danger and ruin their future, said Jaster flatly. I agree, but as I said, this is all speculation. Jaster sighed. There were an awful lot of people he was hearing about recently that needed a good kick in the shins. He'd add this Yoda to the list. Your info is out of date, by the way. Kenobi will be the second Mandalorian Jedi. Jaster had faith that either La would adopt him, or one of the Verde he sent to rescue Kenobi would. One of your Padawans was adopted, with her master's permission, by a Mandalorian over a month ago. Apparently, they've already told your council. He greatly enjoyed the look on Dooku's face. Jaster looked around. His Verde was starting to wrap things up. You tell me about your council on the ships. We're heading towards Mandalore, and we'll be dropping out of hyperspace periodically to check the situation on Bandamir, so we can divert if we need it. You and any of the Jedi are welcome to join us. I hadn't realized, said Hyam. Realized what? Noded was drowsy and vaguely aware he should probably climb off his lover before he fell asleep on him. That the Mandalorians were adopting so many of the children they meet. The rumors say you're killing and torturing them. Noded snorted. Just like the Jedi steal babies. Hyam pressed a soft kiss to his brow. It seems both of our cultures have an image problem.